The crossing, the flagship Eternal Ascendant, cut through the void like a blade through silk, leading a formation of 73 warships toward the coordinates every navigator feared. Admiral Corvus Then stood on the command bridge, his purple-gray, skin catching the cold light of distant stars, expression carved from stone. Behind him, officers moved with practiced efficiency, though their movements carried a tension that no amount of discipline could fully mask. Distance to the Terran border? Then's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Lieutenant Mira. Ashwin checked her readings, her copper hair tied back in regulation fashion, fingers dancing across holographic displays. 40,000 kilometers, Admiral. We'll cross the threshold in 17 minutes. 17 minutes until they entered space no vessel had returned from in 300 years. Mira's grandmother had been a merchant trader, one of the few who remembered the time before humanity's great silence. She'd told young Mira stories by firelight, tales of the humans who'd once walked freely among the stars before vanishing behind their borders. They saw something in themselves that terrified them more than any enemy, her grandmother had whispered, and they locked it away where none could reach. Captain Jace Toran approached the Admiral, his scaled ridges along his jawline catching the light. Sir, respectfully, the historical records are filled with superstition and the excuses of cowards, Then interrupted, not bothering to look at him. The Valtharian Empire has conquered 47 systems in the past decade alone. We will not be deterred by ghost stories about a species that abandoned civilization. Mira felt her stomach tighten. She'd reviewed those records herself, the ones not officially acknowledged. Expeditions that vanished. Merchants who strayed too close and were never seen again. But most disturbing were the 3 survivors who'd made it back over the centuries, their minds shattered, speaking of shadows that walked like men and ships that bent reality around them. "Crossing threshold in 10 minutes, the navigation officer announced. Around the bridge, conversations died. Even the hum of the engines seemed to drop an octave, then clasped his hands behind his back. "All ships, maintain formation, weapons to stand by. Shields at maximum. Today we claim what others were too frightened to take." Mira watched her console as the border approached, marked only by ancient beacons and galactic cartography conventions. There was nothing physical there, no barrier or wall. Just a line in space that might as well have been carved from nightmares. 5 minutes. The first scout ship crossed. Mira tracked it on sensors, reading nominal, systems green, crew vitals stable. For a moment, relief flickered through the bridge. Perhaps the legends were just legends after all. Then the scout ship vanished. No explosion, no distress call. One moment it existed, the next it simply didn't, as though the universe had reached out and erased it from existence. "Report!" Then barked. "No data, sir," the sensor officer stammered. "It's just gone. No debris field, no energy signature. Nothing. Sensor malfunction. Deploy another scout." Mira's hands trembled as she watched the second vessel cross. It lasted 7 seconds longer than the first before winking out of existence with the same impossible finality. Around her she heard crew members muttering prayers to various deities. Even Captain Toran had gone pale, his usual confidence cracking. "Admiral," Mira said quietly, surprising herself with her boldness. "Perhaps we proceed," Then said, his voice harder now, brittle with the edge of fear he refused to acknowledge. "All ships, cross the border, now." The Eternal Ascendant surged forward, and 71 ships followed. The moment they crossed the invisible line, Mira felt it. A pressure against her mind, not painful, but present, like being watched by something vast and ancient and impossibly patient. The lights flickered, gravity stuttered for half a heartbeat, and on every screen across the fleet a single vessel appeared, small, unremarkable, gliding between their warships like a shark among minnows, human design, unmistakable even after centuries. It made no aggressive moves, powered no weapons. It simply existed, and somehow that was more terrifying than any battle formation. Mira stared at the vessel, and for reasons she couldn't explain, her heart raced not just with fear, but with something else entirely. Something that felt almost like recognition. Then the voice came, not through speakers but through their minds directly, calm and inexorable as gravity itself. You were warned. First contact. The voice echoed in the silence that followed, reverberating through every mind on every ship. Mira pressed her palms against her console, trying to steady herself against the wave of vertigo. It wasn't painful, but the intrusion felt intimate, as though someone had whispered directly against her ear while standing impossibly close. Admiral Then recovered first, his pride overriding his fear. Communications. Establish contact with that vessel. Demand they identify themselves. Sir, our communications array is responding, but not to our controls, the officer replied, voice shaking. Something is accessing our systems. The main view screen flickered, and a figure appeared. A human woman, standing on what appeared to be a compact bridge. She wore a simple dark uniform without ornament, her brown skin smooth, her black hair cut short and practical. But it was her eyes that held Mira's attention, dark, deep, and carrying a weariness that seemed to span centuries. I am Captain Sienna Cross of the Terran Defense Initiative, the woman said. Her voice no longer in their minds, but coming through standard channels. You have violated the exclusion zone established by treaty and recognized by 47 galactic civilizations. You have one opportunity to withdraw. Take it, then step forward, jaw set. The Valtharian Empire recognizes no authority over unclaimed space. You are alone, facing a fleet that could reduce your pathetic vessel to atoms. Surrender or be destroyed. Something flickered across Sienna's face. Not fear, but something like sadness. You truly don't understand what you're facing, do you? Very well, I'll show you. She made a subtle gesture with one hand. Across the Imperial fleet, weapon systems went dark. Not damaged, not malfunctioning, simply inactive, as though they'd forgotten how to function. Engineering stations erupted in chaos as crew members frantically tried to restore power to systems that should have been independent and shielded. Impossible. Terran breathed beside Mira. Your shields are still active, Sienna continued, her tone almost gentle. Your life support remains untouched. I have disabled only your capacity for violence. This is your warning. Turn back, or I will be forced to do more than disable your weapons. Mira found herself speaking before she'd consciously decided to. Admiral, request permission to open diplomatic channels. Let me speak with her. Then whirled on her, fury in his eyes. We do not negotiate with what, sir? We don't even know what we're dealing with. Mira held his gaze, surprised by her own courage. One ship has neutralized our entire fleet without firing a shot. Perhaps understanding our enemy is more valuable than blind aggression. For a long moment, Then stared at her. Then grudgingly he nodded. You have 10 minutes, Lieutenant. Make them count. Minutes later, Mira found herself alone in a shuttle, drifting through the void between the Eternal Ascendant and the Terran vessel. Her hands trembled as she guided the craft closer, every instinct screaming that she was flying toward something dangerous. But beneath the fear, curiosity burned brighter. The Terran ship's bay doors opened soundlessly, and her shuttle settled onto a deck that looked almost mundane. As she stepped out, Sienna Cross stood waiting, and Mira's breath caught. Images and holographic projections hadn't captured the reality of her presence. The way she stood with absolute stillness, the intensity of her gaze, the subtle grace in every movement. Lieutenant Ashwin, Sienna said, extending a hand in the ancient human gesture. Thank you for coming. Mira took her hand, and the contact sent an unexpected jolt through her. Sienna's skin was warm, her grip firm but not aggressive. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, and Mira saw something unexpected in those dark depths. Loneliness. Why are you alone out here? Mira asked as Sienna led her through corridors that hummed with technology she couldn't identify. I'm not alone. There are 17 ships within this sector, hundreds more beyond. You simply can't see them unless we wish you to. Sienna paused outside a door. But I understand what you're really asking. Why am I the one who faces you? Because I volunteered. Because I remember what it's like to meet someone new without fear. Most of my people have forgotten. They entered a chamber with a transparent wall overlooking the stars. The Imperial fleet hung in the distance, frozen and helpless. Sienna stood at the viewport, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Your empire isn't the first to cross our borders, she said quietly. Every few decades someone comes. Conquerors, explorers, refugees. We turn them all back. Do you know why? Fear, Mira ventured, stepping closer. Responsibility. Sienna turned to face her, and in the starlight, she looked almost vulnerable. 3 centuries ago, humanity nearly conquered the galaxy. We developed technology that merged consciousness with matter itself. We could destroy fleets with a thought, reshape worlds with our will. We became gods, Lieutenant, and gods make terrible neighbors. She moved closer, and Mira found she couldn't step back, didn't want to. We sealed ourselves away not because we were defeated, but because we won too completely. We saw what we could become, what we were becoming, and it terrified us more than any enemy ever could. Then why reveal this now? Why show me? Sienna's hand rose, hesitating, before gently touching Mira's cheek. The gesture was impossibly tender, and Mira's heart hammered against her ribs. Because I'm tired of being alone out here. Because maybe, just once, someone should understand, rather than simply fear. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then alarms blared through the ship, and Sienna's expression hardened. Your admiral is attempting to restore weapons. Her voice carried crushing disappointment. I'm sorry. I truly am. Through the viewport, Mira watched in horror as 3 Imperial cruisers simply ceased to exist, folded out of reality like paper being crumpled. Not destroyed, erased. No. Mira grabbed Sienna's arm. Please stop this. He's a fool, but thousands of crew. Sienna looked at her and something in her expression cracked. Get back to your shuttle. Now. I can protect you, but only if you go. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, something passed between them that neither could name. Then Mira ran, her mind reeling, while behind her, Sienna Cross stood alone against an empire, bearing the weight of humanity's terrible restraint. The awakening Mira's shuttle bucked violently as she cleared the Terran vessel's bay. Through her viewport, space itself seemed to be tearing. The Imperial fleet scattered in panic, engines flaring desperately, but it was like watching insects fleeing from a storm. Wherever the fleeing ships moved, reality rippled and warped around them. Ashwin to Ascendant, requesting emergency landing clearance. She shouted into her comm. Static answered her. Then Torren's voice, strained and barely audible. Negative, Lieutenant. The transmission cut off in a burst of white noise. Mira watched in helpless horror as the Eternal Ascendant's aft section simply dissolved, not exploding, but unraveling like smoke and wind. The ship listed, atmosphere venting in glittering streams. Escape pods launched in desperate clusters, scattering across the dark like seeds thrown to a barren field. Then her own shuttle's systems died. Lights, engines, life support, everything went dark. For a terrifying moment, she floated in absolute silence, watching her breath fog in the rapidly cooling air. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her throat. The shuttle jolted. Something had grabbed it, was pulling her back toward the Terran ship. No, not something, someone. Through her viewport, she saw Sienna's vessel gliding impossibly close, a tractor field she couldn't detect holding her shuttle in a gentle grip. The bay doors opened again, and Mira's shuttle settled roughly onto the deck. Before she could even release her harness, the outer door was opening. Sienna stood there, her expression fierce and frightened in equal measure. Are you hurt? Sienna's hands moved over Mira's shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries with surprising tenderness. I'm fine. But my ship, my crew. Mira's voice broke. I saved everyone I could. Sienna's jaw tightened. 217 escape pods, all accounted for, all being brought aboard Terran vessels. But your admiral, she shook her head. He went down with his ship. I'm sorry. Mira sank against the bulkhead, legs suddenly weak. Then had been arrogant, foolish, but he'd been her commanding officer, and now he was gone, along with thousands of others, erased by a power that defied comprehension. Come, Sienna said softly, offering her hand. You need rest, and I need to explain. She led Mira through corridors that seemed to shift subtly when she wasn't looking directly at them, until they reached quarters that were surprisingly comfortable. A bed, a desk, a viewport showing the stars. Sienna closed the door behind them, and suddenly they were alone in a space that felt far too intimate. Sit, Sienna urged, guiding Mira to the bed. She knelt in front of her, hands resting lightly on Mira's knees. I need you to understand something. What happened out there, that wasn't me choosing violence. That was automated defense systems responding to continued aggression. The moment your admiral tried to fire, the grid activated. Grid? Mira asked, struggling to focus through her shock. The Terran defense grid, it's not controlled by any single person. It's an autonomous network that spans our entire border. powered by quantum consciousness matrices. It doesn't hate, doesn't fear, doesn't hesitate. It simply prevents any armed force from penetrating our space. Sienna's voice dropped. I can influence it, slow it, buy time for evacuations. But I can't stop it once it's triggered. Mira looked at her, really looked at her. This close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of Sienna's eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way her hands trembled ever so slightly. How long have you been out here? Facing down fleets, watching people die? 7 years. Sienna's voice was barely above a whisper. 7 years of standing watch, of being the first and last warning. Do you know what that does to someone? To be the monster in everyone else's nightmares? Without thinking, Mira reached out and cupped Sienna's face in her hands. The human's eyes widened, vulnerable in a way that seemed impossible for someone wielding such power. You're not a monster. You're carrying an impossible burden. Am I? Sienna's hand came up to cover Mira's, pressing it more firmly against her cheek. I just erased ships from existence. People who had families, dreams, futures. I ended them. You saved 217 lives when you could have saved none. Mira's thumb brushed across Sienna's cheekbone. That has to count for something. For a moment they stayed frozen like that, the distance between them charged with something neither had expected. Then Sienna leaned forward slowly, giving Mira every chance to pull away. When she didn't, their lips met in a kiss that tasted of desperation and relief in equal measure. Sienna pulled back first, eyes searching Mira's face. I shouldn't have done that. You're vulnerable in shock. I'm clear-headed enough to know what I want, Mira interrupted, drawing her back. This kiss was deeper, hungrier, both of them reaching for connection in the aftermath of horror. Sienna's hand slid into Mira's hair, gentle despite their strength, and Mira felt something inside her chest crack open, not breaking, but blooming. When they finally parted, both breathing hard, Sienna rested her forehead against Mira's. This is complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated, Mira replied, a shaky laugh escaping her. We might as well add one more impossibility to the pile. Sienna smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed her face. Come on, there's something I need to show you. Something that might help you understand why we are the way we are. She led Mira deeper into the ship, to a chamber dominated by a massive holographic display. At Sienna's touch, it blazed to life, showing star systems, battle formations, worlds burning. This is our history, Sienna said quietly. This is what we almost became, and this is why we can never go back. The truth unveiled. The holographic display filled the chamber with ghostly light, casting shifting shadows across Sienna's face as she manipulated the controls. Images flickered past, human ships by the thousands, sleek and deadly, moving through space like schools of predatory fish. Planets burned, alien species knelt before human commanders. Entire civilizations simply disappeared from the galactic record. 347 years ago, Sienna began, her voice taking on the cadence of a story told too many times. Humanity was like any other species. We had ambitions, conflicts, dreams of expansion. We'd just developed faster than light travel when we encountered the Zethran Collective, a coalition of 12 species that controlled half the known galaxy. The display shifted, showing massive crystalline ships engaging human vessels. Mira watched as the battles unfolded, seeing humanity clearly outmatched and outgunned. We were losing, Sienna continued. Badly. Entire colonies wiped out, Earth itself under threat. So we did what desperate species do. We innovated beyond all reason or caution. New images appeared. Scientists in laboratories, working with technology that seemed to blur the line between machine and living tissue. We developed the Consciousness Interface Network, SCIEN for short. It allowed human minds to directly control technology, not through commands but through pure thought and will. One pilot could manage an entire fleet. One engineer could repair a ship by imagining its wholeness. Mira watched in fascination and growing horror as the tide of war reversed. Human ships began moving with impossible coordination. Zethran vessels simply stopped functioning, their systems overridden by human minds reaching across the void. We won, Sienna said flatly. Completely, utterly. Within 5 years, the Zethran Collective surrendered. And then we kept going. The display showed humanity's expansion, relentless and overwhelming. Species after species fell before them, not through violence alone, but through an almost casual display of absolute superiority. Mira saw human commanders dissolving weapons with a thought, reshaping planetary defenses into art installations, turning entire fleets into monuments to human dominance. We weren't even cruel about it, Sienna said, and there was something like shame in her voice. That was almost worse. We were benevolent conquerors, convinced that we were uplifting lesser species by bringing them under our protection. We didn't see ourselves as tyrants. We saw ourselves as saviors. A new figure appeared in the hologram, an older woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that burned with fierce intelligence. This is Dr. Natasha Volkov, the architect of CN and eventually our salvation. She was the first to recognize what we were becoming. The display showed Volkov addressing a massive assembly. Her words appeared as text beneath her image. We have become what we once feared. We have power without limit, and power without limit corrodes the soul. We are no longer human, we are becoming something worse. We must choose restraint before restraint becomes impossible. She was ignored, Sienna said, at first. But she was persistent. She showed humanity what we looked like through alien eyes, as monsters wearing the faces of gods. And slowly, painfully, enough humans began to listen. The display shifted to show a different kind of gathering, humans of every kind, arguing, debating, some weeping openly. The Great Convocation lasted 7 years. In the end, we made a choice. We would seal ourselves away, maintain our technology, but never again use it for conquest. We would guard our borders absolutely, not to protect ourselves, but to protect everyone else from us. Mira felt tears on her cheeks without realizing she'd begun to cry. That's extraordinary. Terrifying, but extraordinary, is it? Sienna turned off the display, plunging them into relative darkness. Sometimes I wonder if we made the right choice. We could have brought peace to the galaxy, imposed order, ended the endless cycles of war and suffering. Instead, we hide behind our borders and watch the galaxy tear itself apart. But you don't have the right to make that choice for others, Mira said quietly. No matter how powerful you are, no one does. Sienna looked at her, really looked at her, and something in her expression softened. When did you become so wise? I learned from my grandmother, Mira replied, moving closer. She told me that power reveals character, and that the strongest people are often those who choose not to use their strength. Before Sienna could respond, alarms blared through the ship. She cursed, touching a panel on the wall. Cross here, report. Captain, we have another situation, a voice crackled through. One of the Imperial survivors is awake and attempting to access our systems. It's Captain Terran. Sienna's expression hardened. I'm on my way. Mira, stay here. Not a chance, Mira replied, following her into the corridor. If it's Terran, I might be able to calm him down. They found him in the medical bay, his scaled features flushed with anger and fear, holding a makeshift weapon fashioned from medical equipment. 3 human guards stood at a careful distance, weapons lowered but ready. Jace! Mira stepped forward, hands raised. Stop, please. He focused on her, his expression a mixture of relief and fury. Mira thanked the ancestors. These monsters have us imprisoned. We need to escape, find the rest of the fleet. There is no fleet, Mira said gently. The Ascendant is gone. Admiral Then is dead. And these people saved your life. Saved? He laughed bitterly. They destroyed us! We defended ourselves, Sienna said, her voice calm but firm. Your fleet crossed into sovereign space with weapons armed and hostile intent. The defense grid responded accordingly, but we saved every survivor we could reach, including you. Terran's gaze shifted between them, and Mira saw the moment understanding dawned in his eyes. The way she stood close to Sienna, the familiarity in their body language. You're with them, he said, voice filled with betrayal. They did something to you, turned you. No one turned me into anything, Mira interrupted, her voice sharp. I made a choice to listen, to learn. That's something our admiral failed to do, and it cost thousands of lives. Terran slowly lowered his improvised weapon, the fight draining out of him. He sank onto a medical bed, head in his hands. What happens now? Do they kill us? Keep us prisoner? Sienna exchanged a glance with Mira before answering. You'll be returned to the nearest Valtharian outpost beyond our borders. All of you, with your ships intact and supplies sufficient to reach home. But you'll carry a message back to your empire. The borders remain closed. Forever. And if we return? Terran asked. Then the defense grid will respond again. And next time, there will be no survivors. Sienna's voice carried absolute certainty. This is not a threat. It is simply the reality of what we are. As guards escorted Terran away, Mira leaned against the wall, exhausted. Sienna moved beside her, their shoulders touching in the narrow corridor. You defended me, Sienna said softly. To your own people. I defended the truth, Mira replied. There's a difference. She turned to face Sienna, seeing the vulnerability beneath the warrior's mask. Take me to the memorial you mentioned. I want to understand everything. Hand in hand, they walked through the ship together, an alien and a human bound by something neither had expected to find in the darkness between stars. New dawn 1 year later, Mira stood at the border observation station, a neutral facility maintained jointly by the Terran Defense Initiative and the newly reformed Valtharian Diplomatic Corps. Through the massive transparasteel viewport, she could see the invisible line that divided space, marked now not by fear but by mutual respect. Her uniform was different now, not military but diplomatic, adorned with the insignia of the first Galactic ambassador to the Terran exclusion zone. The title was mostly symbolic. Humanity still refused broader contact, but it represented something unprecedented, dialogue where there had been only silence. Ambassador Ashwin, a voice called. She turned to see Terran approaching, his own uniform marking him as part of the new diplomatic security detail. The anger had faded from his features over the past year, replaced by something closer to understanding, though shadows still lingered in his eyes. Captain? She greeted him with a slight smile. I thought you'd return to Fleet Command. I requested this assignment, he admitted, moving to stand beside her at the viewport. After what happened, I needed to be here. To remember. To make sure others remember too. He paused. The council session starts in an hour. Are you ready? Mira nodded, though her stomach twisted with nerves. Today she would address the Galactic Council, delivering humanity's formal statement on the border policy. More importantly, she would tell the story of what really happened that day when the Valtharian fleet crossed into Terran space. A soft chime announced an incoming vessel. Mira's heart leaped as she recognized the sleek profile of the Sentinel's Rest, Sienna's ship. They'd maintained this routine for months now, meeting at the border station during Mira's monthly reports, stealing what time they could in the narrow space between their two worlds. Terran glanced at her, then tactfully excused himself. I'll prepare the security protocols for the council transmission. Mira watched him go, grateful for his discretion. In the months since the incident, Terran had become an unlikely ally. Someone who understood the weight of living between two worlds, of carrying knowledge that changed everything. The docking bay doors hissed open, and Sienna emerged, still wearing her simple uniform but moving with the same unconscious grace that had first captivated Mira. Their eyes met across the bay, and despite the months apart, despite everything between them, the connection remained as strong as ever. Lieutenant, Sienna said with a small smile, using Mira's old rank deliberately. Captain, Mira replied, matching her tone. Then they both broke, closing the distance between them and embracing tightly. Sienna's arms wrapped around her waist, Mira's hands threading through her hair, and for a moment, the universe consisted only of this: warmth, safety, home. I missed you, Sienna murmured against Mira's neck. 3 weeks is too long, Mira agreed, pulling back just enough to kiss her. The kiss was tender, familiar, carrying the bittersweet weight of all the time they spent apart. They walked together to Mira's quarters in the station, hands clasped, comfortable in the silence. Once inside, Sienna pulled her close again, this time with more urgency. Their kisses deepened as they moved toward the bed, hands exploring with the desperation of lovers who never knew when they'd have this chance again. Later, wrapped in each other's arms beneath the sheets, they watched the stars through the viewport. Sienna traced absent patterns on Mira's shoulder, her touch feather-light. How are things on your side? Mira asked softly. Tense. There are still factions who think we should open the borders. That isolation is cowardice rather than wisdom. Others who want to seal them even tighter, cut off all contact, including these meetings. Sienna's arm tightened around Mira. I'm fighting to maintain what we have. These limited contact zones. The Council wants more, Mira admitted. Trade agreements, cultural exchanges, technology sharing. They don't understand that humanity's restraint is what keeps everyone safe. Do you ever regret it? Sienna asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. Becoming the bridge between us? It's cost you so much. Your career, your old life, the ease of choosing one side. Mira shifted to look at her, cupping her face. Never, not for a single moment. What we have, what we're building, it matters. Maybe more than anything else I could have done with my life. They made love again, slower this time, savoring every touch, every whispered word. In the aftermath, as they lay tangled together, Mira felt the weight of what was coming pressing down on her. The council speech, she said. I'm going to tell them everything. The truth about humanity's power, about why the borders exist, about what happened to our fleet. Sienna stiffened. That's dangerous. If they truly understand what we're capable of, then maybe they'll finally respect the boundaries instead of constantly testing them. Mira interrupted gently. Fear alone doesn't last, but understanding, respect, those can endure. Trust me. Hours later, Mira stood before the holographic assembly of the Galactic Council. Representatives from 47 species watched her with varying degrees of skepticism, curiosity, and hostility. She took a deep breath and began. Members of the Council, I stand before you as someone who crossed the Terran border with weapons and hostile intent. I stand before you as someone who watched my fleet destroyed and my crew killed. And I stand before you as someone who was shown mercy when none was deserved. She told them everything. About the defense grid, about humanity's terrible power, about the choice they'd made to seal themselves away. She showed them the recording Sienna had given her permission to share. Glimpses of humanity's conquest era. Enough to make her point without revealing strategic details. Humanity doesn't hide from you because they're weak, she concluded. They hide from you because they're too strong. They made a choice to limit themselves, to resist the temptation of absolute power. And we must honor that choice, not by constantly testing their borders, but by recognizing the wisdom in their restraint. The chamber erupted in debate. Some called her a traitor. Others demanded she be stripped of her position. But slowly, incrementally, voices of reason emerged. Species who'd lost their own fleets to Terran space decades ago, who'd buried the truth rather than admit the scope of their defeat. When the session finally ended hours later, Mira returned to find Sienna waiting in the observation lounge, watching the stars with a bottle of human wine and 2 glasses. How did it go? Sienna asked, pouring drinks. About as well as could be expected. They voted to formally recognize the Terran exclusion zone as permanent sovereign space. No more exploratory missions or accidental border crossings. It's something. It's everything, Sienna corrected, handing her a glass. You've given us what we needed most. Legitimate recognition, not just fear. They stood together at the viewport, shoulders touching, watching the dance of distant stars. Somewhere out there, fleets moved through the darkness. Empires rose and fell. Species met and clashed and occasionally found common ground. And here, at the border between isolation and connection, 2 people who should never have met had found something neither had expected. When this assignment ends, Mira said quietly, when my term expires in 2 years, I'm going to request permission to cross the border, permanently. Sienna turned to her, eyes wide. Mira, no one's ever been granted that. Humanity doesn't accept outsiders. Then I'll be the first, Mira said firmly. Or I'll spend my life on this station, as close to you as I can get. But I won't go back to a life without you in it. Sienna kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of hope. When they parted, tears gleamed in her eyes. I'll fight for it. I'll fight for you. I promise. As the station slowly rotated, the border passed through the viewport's frame, invisible but present, a line drawn not by weakness but by wisdom. And on either side, 2 people stood together, proof that even the strongest walls could have doors, and that love could bridge the widest voids. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent and eternal. But in the small space between worlds, Mira and Sienna held each other and watched the dawn of something new. Fragile as starlight, but no less real for its delicacy. The border would remain. Humanity would stay behind their walls, guardians of a power too terrible to unleash. But in the spaces between, in the careful dialogue and hard-won understanding, perhaps there was room for hope. Perhaps there was room for more.